Talk about my I don't talk about my faith a lot, but Matthew 25:40 talks about, to the least amongst us you do unto me. I think that's true of most Americans. They simply want order to it. This bill does it. It's funded, it's supported by the people who do it, and it lets us keep our dignity about how we treat other people.
It's really rich for Democratic leaders to say that Donald Trump is a unique threat to democracy when he peacefully gave over power, when he peacefully gave over power, peacefully gave over power, peacefully gave over power, peacefully gave over power.
Well, I've enjoyed tonight's debate, and I think there was a lot of commonality here. And I'm sympathetic to misspeaking on things, and I think I might have with the senator.
Me too, man.
There's one though that this one is troubling to me, and I say that because I think we need to tell the story. Donald Trump refused to acknowledge this, and the fact is that I don't think we can be the frog in the pot and let the boiling water go up. He was very clear. I mean, he lost this election, and he said he didn't. 140 police officers were beaten at the Capitol that day. Some with the American flag, several later died. And it wasn't just in there. In Minnesota, a group gathered on the state capitol grounds in St. Paul and said, we're marching to the governor's residence and there may be casualties. The only person there was my son and his dog, who was rushed out crying by state police. That issue, and Mike Pence standing there as they were chanting, hang Mike Pence. Mike Pence made the right decision. So, Senator, it was adjudicated over and over and over. I worked with kids long enough to know, and I said as a football coach, sometimes you really want to win, but the democracy is bigger than winning an election. You shake hands, and then you try and do everything you can to help the other side win. That's what was at stake here. Now, the thing I'm most concerned about is the idea that imprisoning your political opponents, already laying the groundwork for people not accepting this. And a president's words matter. A president's words matter. People hear that. So I think this issue of settling our differences at the ballot box, shaking hands when we lose, being honest about it, but to deny what happened on January 6th, the first time in American history that a president or anyone tried to overturn a fair election and the peaceful transfer of power. And here we are 4 years later in the same boat. I will tell you this, that when this is over, we need to shake hands this election, and the winner needs to be the winner. This has got to stop. It's tearing our country apart.
Margaret?
Senator Vance, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, well, look, Tim, first of all,
Trump lost the 2020 election. Check this out.
All 7 of you came in undecided. One of you said they've made up their mind. Ryan, who are you going to vote for, and what kind of solidified that opinion?
Well, I'm going to be voting for Kamala Harris. You know, one of the stark sort of aspects of that debate that really stuck with me was when they were talking about January 6th and how Mike Pence certified the election, and they were wondering if J.D. Vance would certify the election should Trump lose. And, you know, J.D. Vance didn't really give us a definitive answer, and I'm disappointed in that fact. And I don't think that I can trust someone, you know, with my vote if they're not going to respect it.
Hey, Revolt family, it's your girl, Teslin Figueroa, chief political correspondent for Revolt News. I hope you watched the first and only vice president debate tonight. Now, overall, most folks were expecting more fireworks. I know I was, but the debate was pretty civil and policy focused. People are actually saying they are feeling kind of warm and fuzzy. Let me know if you feel the same. But during the debate, there was a fact check website that kept popping up, and I hope you used it because there was a lot of statements that either needed to be checked in real time or needed a little bit more context to make sure that you, the viewer, had all of the information. Now, to be fair, I'm going to pick one thing from both candidates that should be fact checked. Senator Vance said that Vice President Harris became the appointed border czar. This is false. You've heard former President Trump say this over and over and over, but the reality is that Vice President Harris was not asked to be the administration's border czar or to oversee immigration policy and enforcement at the U.S.-Mexico border. This has mainly been the responsibility of Homeland Security, including customs and border protection. Now, where Governor Walz got it wrong is he claimed Trump hasn't paid taxes in the last 15 years. This is false. In 2022, a release of some of Donald Trump's tax returns by the House Ways and Means Committee showed that he did file federal tax returns for the years 2015 through 2020. But before becoming president in 2016, Trump declined to disclose his tax returns. And in 2022, New York Times reported that he did not pay any taxes in 10 or 15 years prior to becoming president. So I think Governor Walz got the dates wrong. So I wanted to give you that information. But guys, there were several other statements that were either false or
Welcome
needed
to
more
Let It Be
comment.
Known. We're gonna definitely get into it, and we got two of the best to get into it with. Of course, the one and only Lauren Burke and Rashonda Tate is with us. It's been a long time, as that song says, but Rashonda is definitely with us. The debate, of course, is on the minds of everyone. I want to get to that, but there's a couple because we're going to talk about the debate this morning, but there's a couple of news items I just want to run past, and perhaps you both want to comment on them. The Justice Department announced plans to launch a review of the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre. We all know that was an attack by a white mob on a thriving Black district that is considered one of the worst single acts of violence against Black people in U.S. history. The Justice Department has gotten involved now. The obvious question, Lauren, Rashonda, is what took them so long? We got what, 2 survivors left?
Yeah, I don't know why. Obviously they could be going out of office in a few months, right? I mean, this could be the end of the Biden administration in a few months. So it feels like they're rushing to do a few things before they leave, but this was something that could have happened literally in his first 2 months. So I'm not sure why we're hearing about this now, but I'm glad it's happening.
Yeah, Rashonda, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't know if it's because in June the Oklahoma Supreme Court dismissed the lawsuit, and they felt that the Justice Department is like, okay, they've exercised all of their rights locally. It's time for us to step in. And the last 2 survivors are both over 100 years old, and they called on Joe Biden in July to intervene, and so maybe they're just now answering that call.
Yeah, the survivors are what, 109 and 105?
109 and 110.
110.
Yeah.
Whoa. I mean, we're going to get more into that later, perhaps this week. There's stories on Black Press websites about this, so folks, you can get more information there. I want to bring this up too. Speaking of Lauryn's, Pras is suing Lauryn Hill for taking what he says is most of the proceeds from the latest Fugees tour, and he has went in. His lawsuit says that Lauryn Hill took 66% of the proceeds, which is not in line with what Fugees tours have gotten in the past, and he blamed her for slow ticket sales and the cancellation of shows because of her, quote, late arrivals to these shows, and in some cases not even showing up. So the Fugees, they're killing me softly here, Lauren. What's up with that?
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me because she has a reputation of showing up late, no shows, this and that. So it's not surprising, but I haven't read the full case yet.
Yeah. Well, go ahead, Rashonda.
I've read it, but when somebody shows you who they are, believe them. So you knew what Lauryn was when you agreed to go back out in 2023 with her. And so you knew what you were getting into with the chance you were taking, and you were willing to take that chance anyway. She called Lauryn Hill called the lawsuit baseless and said it was a lot of unwarranted attacks. So this feels like some bad blood. He was ready for the Fugees to come back out so he could make some money, and he depended on the wrong person to make that happen.
Well, and he's not joining Lauryn Hill and Wycliffe overseas for another leg of this tour that apparently is going forward. And in addition to that, we know that Pras last year was convicted on federal charges related to some sort of international scheme with some Asian business people, and had something to do with the campaign of Barack Obama from 2008, and he was convicted. He is awaiting sentencing now in a case that where the minimum sentence, what I understand, could be 20 years. He's appealing it, of course, but so he has those type of legal problems as well. So the Fugees are in a little bit of a disarray right now.
Yeah.
And another bit of news. I mean, we continue to see our A-list stars leave us. The great John Amos has died at the age of 84. What's interesting about this, though, Lauren and Rashonda, is that the news just broke on this yesterday. His son Casey made it public yesterday, but it happened back on August the 21st. Actually, John Amos had died. No one had a clue. At least the public did not have a clue that a month and a half ago that this superstar had passed away.
Wow, that's a long time. For nobody to know that somebody's passed away, and obviously there's some sort of issue with the estate, in the classic way that people have these family issues with estates, and there's some conflict going on in the background. I have a feeling that probably has to do with the fact that we didn't know that he was gone for a month.
Yeah, absolutely. And plus, and like you said, the conflict. Well, his son Casey and his daughter have been fighting for a few years now, with each
Mhm.
accusing the other of elder abuse. Particularly the daughter, Shannon, had been accusing Casey for a long time of elder abuse. And of course, John Amos had spoken up against that, saying that he didn't know what his daughter's problem was. He was not being mistreated in any way. We've seen Rashonda a lot over the last several years. Casey with his father on doing TikToks and things of that nature. But this is really sad. John Amos is to hear of John Amos's death, especially a month and a half later.
Yeah, I'd like to say that maybe the family wanted to grieve in peace and wanted to work out their issues on their own. But because of their history, it definitely may be more to it. They wanted to work out the things. We see these kind of problems in regular non-celebrity families, so it doesn't surprise me that a celebrity would have family drama.
Yeah, and so many people on social media have been replaying that famous scene from Good Times when they find out that James Evans had died in that car crash in Mississippi, in Florida, finally breaking down that famous scene in which he breaks the vase or whatever it was, and it finally hits her that he was gone. Um, Certain, that show, and we can just spend a couple of minutes, if you will, on that show itself. I mean, of course, John Amos had some great roles. Coming to America, uh, Let's Do It Again. He even played the father of Will Smith in the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Many may not remember that, but he had a memorable role there, a deadbeat dad role actually, there. But Amos left Good Times, or was fired from Good Times, after he continually complained about JJ's character, and what Norman Lear and others had kept writing there and kept putting in the forefront. He felt like it should have been an emphasis on these three kids trying to become what he said were surgeons and lawyers, and even in JJ's case, great artists. But they continue to, in Amos's words, make uh, JJ Walker's character buffoonish.
Mhm.
Yeah, JJ's character was minstrelsy, is what it was. And remember, they originally they didn't want to have a father in the they didn't want to have a father cast in the family, and that thankfully somebody pushed back against that.
Right.
And then which is the classic thing in a lot of these types of shows where you have families or something around family, suddenly the father, the black father, is always missing. I've always thought that that was Hollywood's way of never wanting to cast a black male, because basically that's what you had to do. And it ends up being John Amos, who ends up in the background saying what he should be saying, which was all this stereotyping and nonsense that they had around the JJ character, which got worse and worse and worse as that character got more and more popular. Was terrible, which he was right, and he of course eventually quit the show over it.
Yeah. He and Esther Rose also had reportedly had problems with that role of JJ as well. Not with Jimmy Walker himself. Folks have to understand it was the character that Esther Rose, and you remember she left the show as well for a season and came back after that was rectified. And Amos had always said he didn't know why he was fired and how he was fired was so unceremoniously. Of course, he went on to do Roots, of course, played a memorable Kunta Kinte in Roots. Let's Do It Again with Bill Cosby and Sidney Poitier. And as Power 96 mentions, I forget this too, Rashonda, that he also played Tommy's dad on Martin.
Yeah. I mean, he had a storied career. I grew up on Good Times. My mother still loves Good Times. I don't know how we watch that every day, and just it is horrible, the stereotypes. But it was the time. People loved the show at the time. Looking back, they really did do a disservice, and John Amos was one to speak out against that. And he did. He made that Kunta Kinte role. So he has a career to have been proud of.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, it started with Maude and All in the Family. There was appearances there, and his career skyrocketed. And so John Amos, I was going to say James, but John Amos has died at the age of 84. Just another big name that has left us in the last what? Gosh, first of all, in the last couple of days, we talked yesterday about Dikembe Mutombo. But in the last month, it seems like, Lauren, we've lost a lot of folks.
Yeah, there's a lot of folks that are passing away, and obviously Pete Rose is another one out there. But John Amos thing is sort of a big deal. He really was one of the first black male, sort of strong black male character. Those are rare to find even now. What it comes down to is who's writing for that character, and that is why they had such an adventure. Because, of course, they push back on. I mean, I found, frankly, as somebody who grew up in suburbia, I found the entire scene unrecognizable because the idea, and I'm not saying that other people didn't just thought that way, but it was a stereotype top to bottom, but it is interesting to note that the actors in the background were arguing. Of course, they're going to have to argue because this is the interpretation of a black family from white Hollywood. So you had that.
I like what you said there too, because I think you're spot on about the first strong black male character on television. Because prior to that, there were, who was it?
Right, it was women. Remember, there was a bunch of women characters, single women that somehow have no man around. That right, there was several of those that happened, and then you have John Amos's character who has to sort of fight for his life. But of course, who's writing that? Some white writer probably was in the background writing that, which of course is going to be a challenge. But even now, it's not particularly easy to find a strong masculine black male character. And if you do find that, typically that character will not be centered in the story. I'm a big fan of Friday Night Lights, which is a great show on football based in Texas. And it was incredible to me. That show never had it all. I think it had 6 seasons, and they never had it was football, remember, we're talking about. So we're talking about sports. And yet there was no black male character in that whole thing. In fairness, they did have several white characters that didn't have fathers, but it was built on, this idea that there had to be a woman running the family, and then you never had a black male character. And then the one that pops up is estranged from the family and left the family. It's a classic stereotyping of black men.
Yeah. Wow. And George Jefferson wasn't it.
Right.
George was not it.
Right.
Vashanda's laughing. Vashanda, he just wasn't it, right?
No, not at all. And it's like everything came from All in the Family, from Maud and All in the Family, and this bigot was the spinoff for everything.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because you look at you talk about Archie Bunker, you look at his character. First of all, these characters couldn't fly today. They wouldn't fly today at all,
Right.
would they? But I always say it with All in the Family and Archie Bunker. The great thing about that was to show you just how insidious and how asinine it was to be to have so much hate for no reason. I mean, they painted him as an idiot. They really
I
did.
saw an interview with him yesterday, actually, and he said he was actually shocked that a lovable bigot was so well received. He said he just didn't expect that a bigot would take off, and then he felt like a lot of times people missed the mark on how much Archie Bunker missed in life by having all of this hate.
Exactly, and that's part of my point too. And as Greer noted, Carol O'Connor in real life was a very progressive individual, and we also know that Michael Stivic, Rob Reiner, very liberal guy. He played that on the show though, and he's exactly what he was on that show in real life. We actually saw him at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago back in August. But it's really interesting how they cast these roles too. But nonetheless, folks, our hearts go out to the family of John Amos, who died at the age of 84. And now to the debate, of course. Listen, I'm gonna let you two have at it with the debate, but the thing about it is, Coach Walls, he started off seeming to be very nervous. It's not necessary. It doesn't look like the debate stage. It didn't look like the debate stage was something that he was accustomed to. Wasn't his bag. But then he got into it. Then he found his footing, I thought. Lauryn, I'll start with you because I know that this is your this is your forte. This is what you do.
Yeah. Well, late into the night on Roland Martin Unfiltered, we talked about, of course, all aspects of this probably till midnight. You're right. I think that obviously this was the biggest stage that Governor Walz had been on, and Vance had an advantage in that because he had several debates with Congressman Ryan when he ran for Senate. And also I think age is a factor here. You have somebody who's a millennial who's used to the communications age that we live in, which is a very soundbite driven age, and you're talking in short snippets, and you're talking really fast. And for some reason, a lot of these Republican candidates really rely on talking really fast and making sure there's no fact checking. And of course, CBS ensured that there would be no fact checking, which is dereliction of duty as a journalistic organization. And on top of that, we had two questioners that for some reason wanted to pretend that there was no pretense to this debate. Well, the backstory and the pretense are the whole story here of the 2024 campaign, which is around the fact that we have somebody running for office that effectively is talking openly about things that are not democratic. Okay. Not only that the election was stolen from him, which of course he's lying about and has been lying about for years after losing to Joe Biden by 8 million votes, but that he wants to deport a bunch of brown folks coming in from the Mexican border, that he wants to have, quote, one day of violence, something that he said only, 72 hours before this debate. And you have Margaret Brennan and Norah O'Donnell speaking as if we're just having a policy discussion and it's 1990. That I had a huge problem with, a huge, huge problem with. There was no black question, not even an obligatory, stereotypical black question.
No, it wasn't.
This is what you get when you have this type of, format. And I think the format was very favorable for Senator Vance. And in fact, I think 40 minutes in, he was winning. The problem was at about 50 minutes, when we discussed democracy, which should have been discussed in the first 20 minutes, it's then revealed how crazy and right-wing J.D. Vance is. And you and Greer, of course, put up the clip of him saying that, quote, it was rich that anybody should be talking about why there was a problem with the 2020 elections and why, oh my goodness, Trump handed over power. Is he out of his mind? But the problem is Governor Walz did not bring a strong rebuttal there at all. I mean, we should have said some version of, wait a minute, the supporters of the people who are voting for you violently attacked the United States Capitol, violently assaulted a number of police officers, several of whom died either by suicide or stroke or whatever, in the aftermath of it, in one of the most violent, worst incidents in American history on our democracy. And somehow none of that is spoken by either the moderators or Governor Walz. And, I'll stop there and come back around again on the next one. But that for me was problematic. That was problematic.
It was very much problematic, Rashonda. Now, he did get in some digs when it came to January 6th, though, right?
Yeah, but the problem is how many people were still around at that point. Us news junkies were still there. I do worry that we lost some of the people that may have made a difference. It may have made a difference for her. But honestly, it was refreshing to go back to 2006 debates, to not see, lies aside, because there were plenty of that, but it was refreshing to see two civil adults having a debate. Now, there were plenty of times where I was screaming at my TV for Walz to say this or say that or attack this. But I think that his nice approach reached to some independent voters. I think that's who he is. And I think going in and expecting anything differently is where a lot of us went wrong.
Oh, yeah, I guess. But I also thought, and I think you kind of hit on it too, and Lauryn has said it, I also expected him to push back. I expected Walz to really push back. It was just, it's one thing to be cordial, and you're right, Rashonda, 2006. I mean, you have to go back that far to find a cordial debate. But this was, you had them complimenting each other. I did not expect that, Lauryn.
Yeah, well, see, the problem is the reason that you had two civil people up there is that one of the missions of J.D. Vance last night was to appear human and not to appear like the squinty-eyed a-hole that he actually is. He has to conceal that. He has to conceal that because that persona that is the real him is not a persona that people like to vote for. And the reason that we know he's the guy that would steal your parking space in front of a grocery store and then not even look back at you and acknowledge it is that has always been the rumor about J.D. Vance. And if you roll tape on J.D. Vance, it comes down to saying things on policy that are absolutely right-wing outrageous. His abortion answer really revealed this. He was trying to appear human on the abortion answer, right? And so Governor Walz did a pretty good job at revealing some of that. The other one was healthcare. I mean, the Republicans have been working hard to destroy healthcare coverage. And Vance stands up there and says that Trump, quote, saved Obamacare. And this is where CBS is embarrassing. Remember that this is the network of Edward R. Murrow and Walter Cronkite. This is what this has come to. This is what happens when these news organizations start running out of money and get desperate and want entertainment over fact and entertainment over truth. They don't want to get in the way of the show. They don't want to get in the way of the spectacle. They want to sit back and do no fact checking. And Margaret Brennan does fact checking every Sunday on Face the Nation. So this makes no sense. And by the way, when she does do the one fact check on Haitians, which was desperately needed because, of course, J.D. Vance, who is a liar.
They let him off the hook on that too, didn't they?
They let that drop.
He's a liar who went on a pathological racist tour for 2 weeks talking about how Haitian immigrants were stealing and eating people's cats and slaughtering geese and all this other nonsense, which he should have been called out on. How is that not brought up, by the way, by the moderators? How is that not questioned? How is it that Governor Vance doesn't bring it up? So for me, all this nonsense about Midwestern politeness and, oh, they were polite. I think that in the times that we live in is more of a reflection of journalists abdicating their responsibility and people wanting to be in fantasy world. Because you have to remember, we saw this in Charlottesville in Virginia. white people do not really want to discuss racism. They don't want to discuss it. That's why these people show up in Charlottesville 2 times and 3 times with tiki torches, and nobody says anything, including the governor and the mayor of Charlottesville, Mike Signer. And then boom, in August of 2017, there's an explosion because everybody was trying to pretend that there was nothing to see. That's the exact same thing that happened before the attack on the U.S. Capitol. And it's the exact same thing that I hear when people say, oh, I'm glad that everybody was nice during the debate. Nobody on the Democratic side should be nice during the debate. But of course, J.D. Vance was trying to pretend that, oh, I'm a normal person, because he knows that there's millions of people watching.
Oh, God. And, you know, they talked about, like you said, healthcare, but they also talked about leadership, right? And with this Middle East turmoil going, and Vance continued to say Kamala Harris's policies. And I thought, too, Rashonda, that should have been corrected by Walz. These are not. Kamala Harris is the vice president. I think you, Lauren, one of you said it. Lauren said it at the beginning about this border czar stuff. She was not. This is not her policy. She's the vice president. The policy is of Joe Biden.
Yeah, that was one of the things I screamed at my TV. I don't know. I understand they don't want to throw Joe Biden under the bus and they tiptoe around Joe Biden. But at some point, somebody has to say that Kamala was vice president. She couldn't make these decisions. She couldn't do all these things that you claim that she could do, just like Mike Pence couldn't do things when he was vice president. But that was another area that they just kind of let slide. They're going to keep saying border czar until half of the America is like, well, she was border czar, because they continue with it. And we take the high road of, okay, we've said she's not the border czar. We're going to leave it at that. But half of America calls her the border czar because the Republicans repeat it incessantly.
Yeah, and again, an opportunity to fact check or to correct. That again, it fell on both the moderators, and it fell on Walz to say something. I think he was, Lauren. It just seems like he was looking for his foot, and he found it a few times for sure. As Mike V says, he says Governor Walz was he was walking on eggshells when he didn't have to. Instead of worrying about being clipped out of context, he should have dropped the hammer about national security. That was another issue.
Well, Governor Walz clearly got better as the debate went on. Frankly, I think he was just nervous in the first 30 minutes. And that wasn't really reflecting how good he could be. And you could see how good he could be in like the last 30 minutes, particularly. But he has a tendency to talk too long. I mean, he had that question that Margaret Brennan hit him with about the Asia trip. And instead of just saying, I misspoke and made a mistake, he went on for quite a while on that for really no good reason. I think he honestly is that person. I mean, the good thing about him is that you certainly don't get the feeling of anybody trying to fool you. I mean, I think he's just, this is who he is. With Vance, I got the feeling that this is a person trying to fool me. Now, I'm in Delray, Virginia fairly often. And Vance happens to live in Delray, Virginia. And one of the things in Delray, Virginia, other than a very nice ice cream place, is one of the only vinyl record stores really on the East Coast. A lot of them in New York have closed up. And everywhere I go in Delray with my boyfriend, there's somebody mentioning that they've had a bad and ridiculous and weird and rude encounter or strange encounter with the vice presidential nominee on the Republican side. I mean, so once again, the goal of J.D. Vance was in front of multi-millions of people to appear like a normal person, like your next door neighbor, which is, of course, not who he is. We know that because of the, like I said, racist tour that he went on with regard to Haitians, which is all lying, by the way, all lying. This whole idea that, oh, they're kidnapping people's pets, which of course was launched by Donald Trump and then of course punctuated by J.D. Vance. But the attacks on Harris were expected. That is what Vance's job is. Now, Walz's job is to deflect that. So I'm not sure what Pete Buttigieg or these people in the background were thinking when they were coaching Governor Walz. But clearly somebody told him, yeah, don't attack that much. That was a mistake. That was a huge mistake. And I know the party thinks that Pete Buttigieg is the darling and all that. That was a mistake. So I don't know what the debate prep was. That was a big strategic mistake in this debate.
One of the things I think we have a problem with is we go back to how we got in this situation in the first place. We got in this situation where a Trump can exist in this world because we did not push back. Journalists would allow him to come on, Trump to come on TV, call in, because we were trying to remain objective. We were trying to do the job of journalists, and that is what created a Trump. I am with you in this day and age that can't exist anymore because they continue to lie. And when CBS is not, as journalists, aren't going to fact check them, you're going to continue to get lies. I mean, Trump saved Obamacare. You also had Vance, he was this close to saying my mom was on Obamacare. But it was so many opportunities for someone to do some fact checking.
Well, and also I thought a moment too that really showed you kind of who Vance is when CBS did mute his microphone and he said, "I thought we wasn't fact checking."
Well, see, Stacey, the only people in this world, and you learn this as a journalist pretty quickly, who get pissed off about investigation and fact checking are liars. Okay, when you're a liar, you get pissed off that somebody's going to fact check you. Now, remember back at the NABJ, I'm old enough to remember back at the NABJ Chicago conference when there was this whole big kerfluffle with Donald Trump backstage about fact checking. Why is that? It is a core part of their strategy, lying, getting up there, using the platform of these big networks like CBS and CNN, getting up there and lying, having it played, having it looped, having that footage, having 20 million people watching at a debate and lying their asses off is a core strategy for them. And what gets in the way of that core strategy is a journalist sitting there fact checking. And J.D. Vance knew that and was prepared to say what he said and then ramble on about visas. And then Norah O'Donnell and Brennan, and you can see it in the video where Brennan is kind of elbowing Norah O'Donnell to go on to the next question. Norah O'Donnell stops talking inexplicably, which was stupid. You need to take control. And of course, thank goodness for the control room that cut the mics off, because that's exactly what they should have done. First of all, there should have been no agreement, and there should never be an agreement by a news organization to not fact check. That is ridiculous. We live in an age of misinfo and disinfo. We live in an age where you can dismantle a black lieutenant governor in Virginia with zero evidence, zero testimony, and zero investigation. These things are intentional. These are not accidents. These are not coincidences. I mean, people know they can use certain things to get into the public sphere and defame somebody and destroy somebody, or get certain elements like this idea that, you know, somehow now the vice president's in charge of immigration policy. I mean, this is ridiculous. But they're able to say it again and again and again. They're doing the Goebbels method of communication. You repeat a lie over and over again, and somebody believe it. And they know that. And these journalists are conceding and, in fact, rewarding them in this strategy.
And that's sad. That is real sad. One of the things that stood out to, among so many other things, was the gun violence in the schools talk. And what J.D. Vance said really struck a bad chord. It seems like even with his supporters, he talked about what is it, locks on doors or something? I mean, he said something outrageous. Do you recall that with the schools, where he said you just need more locks?
Yeah, more locks. And now that's one of the moments where the conversation was dropped by niceties. And J.D. Vance he shut it down and threw Tim off by saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, your son witnessed the shooting. I hate to hear that." And, you know, and then that Midwestern, well, thank you. And now they're bantering instead of dealing with the issue that is an absurd idea and not the answer.
Exactly.
I mean, absurd is exactly right.
There was basically, J.D. Vance was messaging to lower income white voters in the Midwest, the core group that would vote for Donald Trump. So it's to people who have never watched anything before, don't know too much about civics, lower income, and it's white folks. You can see who he was messaging to.
Yeah.
And the gun thing, the phrase, easy access to guns, I don't remember hearing that. Maybe I missed it.
Yeah, he said more locks and stronger windows at schools.
Yeah, because this is fantasy land. I mean,
Right.
we have a school shooting every few weeks. So, and we're the only industrialized nation that has this problem. Again, that to me was more the fault of Governor Walz. That's an issue that polls well for the Democrats. And so you got to bring it, just like on abortion and health care. That is something that the Democrats should be able to punish the Republicans on, and it didn't happen.
Oh, and you're right. It falls on Walz, but it came across as Walz went in there, and you said it, Lauren, like Buttigieg and whomever else was there to prep him. They demanded probably that keep it civil. And I don't know that, like you said, I don't know that this is a time to do that. We're 30 some odd days out, and not only that, you got to go up against so many lies and so many this throwing rocks and hiding hand stuff, Rashonda, that the MAGA folks are so adept to do.
Yeah, and even if you just look at this last Trump appearance, where he rambled about climate change and jails in Congo and all of that, I just think we do not have room anymore to let stuff slide. I'm with Lauren, the whole CBS not fact checking. I don't get that at all. But at the end of the day, the thing that concerns me the worst and most in all of this is J.D. Vance, I think, is actually more dangerous than Donald Trump. He's a better liar than Donald Trump. He wraps it up in a prettier ribbon, and he does it effortlessly with a straight face. And so if you say that he won the debate, as some people are saying, I think he won in the lies. And then Walz lost because of his failures in some area to attack when there was a red carpet laid out for him to attack.
Well, Let's Love It has joined us in saying if Walz pulled his wig and door knockers off and changed into his sneakers, it would have hurt the campaign. Let's Love It says that the point is he was talking to white men. Lauren, what do you say to that?
You can be talking to white men and be making corrections on issues like guns and abortion and healthcare. I don't understand why it is that because it's two white guys standing up there, you can't just correct the basic record. Remembering that we are now 8 years into the political career of Donald Trump, 8 years, which started with him lying his ass off about the first black president of the United States, and whether or not he was a citizen. And on top of that, trying to lie about his record at Harvard. Because, of course, everything with these people when they're racist is always about trying to convince themselves that they're smarter than somebody black who's clearly smarter than they are. So, of course, there had to be something wrong with the Harvard records of Barack Obama, which, of course, is complete nonsense. But at the point I'm making, though, is that, Governor Walz knows that. Mm-hmm. Right? Governor Walz knows that. Pete Buttigieg knows that. Whoever the heck, prepared for this debate would know that that's the context that we show up in. The fact of the matter is that white Democrats are uncomfortable talking about race. They're uncomfortable defending against racism, which makes no sense, ignoring the fact that their base is black voters, black women to be specific, and then, of course, followed by black men. So I'm not sure why at this point, 8 years in, the Democratic Party doesn't have a clear strategy to talk about liars and dealing with lying and liars and people who want to bring everything back to the 1940s. You should have a strategy for that by now. Okay. And you should be walking out on that debate stage knowing that person was. And by the way, all this talk about immigration, where was J.D. Vance during this? Well, guess what? He was in the U.S. Senate. Right. So when that immigration deal happened, where it was like the Republicans, Langford and the gang were trying to put together an immigration deal, and then Trump comes along and says, don't do it because he wants it as an issue during the election. Mm-hmm. So they scuttle the deal. How does that not get mentioned by Governor Walz? How does that not get mentioned in debate prep? So you can be polite and bring that stuff up and be talking to white men at the same time.
Well, he was polite enough to bring up the fact that Vance is standing there, and this is his words, and not Mike Pence because of Trump's actions.
How about that? The moment that I think Walz really evened up, I thought he was losing for probably the first 40 minutes. The minute that the alien, the mask comes off the alien, the space alien we've been watching for 50 minutes that's pretending to be human, when it came to the deep MAGA statements of J.D. Vance around Jan 6 and democracy, that was the minute when Walz turns to Vance and says, and by the way, who won the election? Which, by the way, Walz had to do because the moderators apparently couldn't do it. It is dereliction. So at any rate, Walz turns, Vance does not answer. Walz calls him on not answering. That was the moment that Walz, in my view, evened up what was a losing effort until that moment, because that was, of course, followed by Brennan asking the question, Vance dodging, and then Walz coming in with the follow-up that was crushing, really, and embarrassing and crazy. So that's the clip that's going to get played over and over and over today.
Yeah, and as I saw afterwards, some folks say on CBS that Kamala Harris should use that, will probably use that in an election ad. Mike V says, and I want you to get your response, Rashonda, and Lauren, of course, if you want to chime in. He says, historically, vice presidents add little value to a ticket. It wasn't until Sarah Palin ran with John McCain that it became a factor. He says you see a consistent track record of weird folks showing up to the ticket. Get your thoughts on that, because will this have any impact? I guess is the question on November 6th.
I mean, I think that it has minimal impact, but here's the thing, if you look at the polls, everything is so close that every little bit matters. So if Vance was able to, or Walz are able to reach, just a handful of people, it could make the difference in some key areas. So for that reason, I think it matters. On the whole, I think they're voting for the top of the ticket. It does give you the opportunity to see, is this the person I would want if something were, God forbid, to happen to the president. But I don't know, going into the voting booth, someone will say, well, I don't really like J.D. Vance, so I'm not going to vote for Donald Trump.
I think I think it's clear that vice presidential debates don't matter all that much. I frankly think that the Vice President Harris, picked the wrong person. I think she should have picked Shapiro or Bashir. They picked Governor Walz. They need Pennsylvania. They seem to forget that they need Pennsylvania to win this election. And they also seem to forget that Shapiro is quite good. This might have been one of these Tim Kaine, Hillary Clinton, I don't want to pick somebody that's going to overshadow me type deals, because Shapiro is quite good. And some of these things I can imagine in my head him debating last night and thinking this would have been a completely different performance. But having said that, I don't think that these vice presidential debates really matter unless you pick somebody that's terrible. And Governor Walz is not terrible.
I actually don't know if Shapiro was the better choice, because he is definitely more polished. On looking at him, I think he would have done better. My issue is reaching that demographic that he needs to reach. Him and Kamala were kind of on the same level. Tim Walz brings that Midwestern vote in, those white men who don't really want to vote for Kamala, who would then see Shapiro as slick and kind of on the same level as Kamala. I just think she could have brought in Chris Rock better than Trump.
Why not Chris Rock? Him and Bernie Mac made a good team when they ran in that movie. But Lauren and Rashonda, really, how will what's happening? This is another topic in Israel. How will that impact this election? And also, and this came up as well last night, the strike. How will these two things impact the election?
Obviously, we're going to have some October surprises, and we're going to have some efforts on the part of certain people to try to throw issues out there, to force the folks on the ballot to answer on certain questions that, frankly, I think Americans generally don't vote on. I don't think foreign policy, no matter where it is a key metric that makes people vote one way or the other than thinking to themselves that billions of dollars are going overseas to Ukraine and to other places. And while we're watching certain people here have a very tough economic time, that's something that you hear on the doors all the time. Economy, gas prices, grocery prices, that type of thing. People do not like reading. I don't care what anybody says. People do not like reading that billions of dollars are going overseas without there being a very obvious and clear reason for that. And that is not obvious and clear on a lot of our foreign policy. I don't think it's a make or break metric.
I actually think the bigger issue will be if they get some checks, some FEMA checks to North Carolina and Georgia, that may override what's happening in Israel with Israel and Iran, just because that's where the eyes on. People want to see you doing everything you can to help those hurricane victims now, because if you look at X, the right wing is having a ball. They're going, saying we don't have the help, but you're sending billions to Ukraine. You're over here helping Israel and Iran. The truth of the matter on that doesn't matter. It's what they feel is being helped. So if you get those FEMA checks out there, you help those people recover. That's what they'll remember going to the ballot box.
And Greer says she's a conspiracy-ish type. Lauren, do you believe, for instance, the strike, is that something that is happening by design?
That's happening because of some political stuff in the background. It's just like with the Teamsters not endorsing Vice President Harris. These things are not happening by accident. I mean, they're happening because they want to create some sort of chaos right now, 35 days before, to make it look like the Biden administration or what they like to say, the Harris administration, isn't doing this or that. That's going to be hard to do because if Biden shows up on camera and starts talking, oh, that's right, he's the president of the United States, and particularly if he lands, which at some point he probably will land in North Carolina, that will do it. So, I mean, we'll see. I think there's no way these are coincidental. We're going to get a lot of things in the next 34 days that are going to be very unusual. You can see Trump ramping up the violent rhetoric. We saw it this weekend. You're going to see him ramp up the racism. He wants it to be about racism. Because he knows it makes people uncomfortable. He knows it's something people don't want to deal with. He wants to brand her to race and make it about, oh, she's a race candidate. That's why I think she did a very good job at just not answering certain stupid questions like the one from NABJ about her ancestry. Oh, she's now pretending that she's Black. He wants her to engage on that. And she's not doing it, and she's got to keep that up.
Well, Rashonda, these are you of the same mind that these strikes and of course the Israel situation continues to drag on, and now Iran is involved? Is that related to the election?
I mean, I think they're strategic in everything that they do. I think that there's some backroom calls being made. You can't tell me that Trump isn't trying to finagle some things in the background to make him look better, because that's the end goal for him on almost everything. So yeah, there's some political things driving all of this type of stuff that we see. There's also, he will lie in a minute, like he did with Biden calling Brian Kemp, because even though Brian Kemp came right back on and said, oh, the president did call me, what's getting played, what people are seeing is Trump's soundbite, not Biden, not Brian Kemp. And that's the way that Trump wants it. He knew he was lying when he said that, but he knew his clip would be the one that was retweeted and sent all over the social media universe.
That's exactly right there. That's exactly right. They're playing a game and they're very good at it. And Trump, I think, this is the whole ball game with communications right now. It doesn't matter like who's yelling in the room or who's saying you're wrong or you're a liar. The only thing that matters is that you're able to platform and amplify yourself talking for about 15 to 20 seconds. And then, depending on what the audience is, and for a debate, we can get into the 20 and 30 million viewer range. You're just trying to platform that lying content. And they know that. If they can just say it, That's why they're so against anything that might stop them, like fact checking, otherwise known as journalism, by the way. And so that's what their communications mission is, and they're very good. And that's why you heard the president blurt out at the September 20 debate, they're eating the dogs, etc. And then he goes into a thing. He knows that there's a certain percentage of people who are going to listen to that and believe it. And in fact, he was right. They got bomb threats. They got all sorts of drama because of him running his mouth.
Yeah. Well, and Power 96 says the war in Palestine is related to our election. Israel does this every time there's an election here. And I'm going to throw this out there because I must throw this out there. Greer says everybody has leverage except Diddy. So, what the what? We got to talk about Diddy at another time as we are out of time. But I mean, quick. Listen, we got 1 minute, Lauryn. I really got to get a quick thought from you because as busy as you are, busy as Rashawn is, who knows when we'll have you again. So, quick thought on this new situation or this latest situation with Sean Combs, 120 new accusers.
No matter who it is, black, white, entertainer, not entertainer, north, south, Democrat or Republican, I always wait to see the case. I always wait to see the evidence. And typically I want to wait to see people under oath talking. I don't care what attorneys say at a press conference. I don't care what Damian Williams says standing at some chart at a press conference. None of that matters to me. And I know, these attorneys have gotten very good at the PR side. They've gotten very good at being at really, and I don't know how they legally do it, impacting people who are potential jurors. So they're throwing out information on the case into the public eye that potential jurors are going to see. I don't believe any of that. You'll remember, again, I'm old enough to remember when Chris Brown was accused of rape in a $20 million case and then revealed the text messages of the person that was accusing him. And of course, everybody ran for the hills. This is not to say that sexual violence is not serious and needs to be dealt with. Of course, it does need to be dealt with. But in this country, we have a certain history, particularly around black men and particularly around this subject matter. And in the name of Ida Wells, I am going to wait to see the details, even though we already know that Mr. Combs is a low character individual. This man beat his girlfriend in the elevator vestibule, in effectively a public space, as if it was nothing. So we know who we're dealing with, but I want to see stuff in court and not at a press conference.
Rashonda?
And Diddy is going to do his time. He's gonna suffer behind this, but I also see this will get very interesting. I see that last scene of New Jack City when Nino Brown stood up and adjusted his suit and said, "If I'm going down, everybody going down." I think we're about to see that.
Well, and real quick, Lauryn and Rashonda, there's an attorney who, and I can't remember her
Tony
name.
Busby here in Houston.
No, it was a black woman who was on News Nation who said that she was approached by an individual who has a tape of Diddy with a celebrity that's more famous than Diddy, and it's a sex tape with Diddy in it and that particular celebrity in it. And the individual that approached her wanted her to broker a sale. She said, no way, no how. But she said that she did see screenshots, and she said that this person is infinitely more famous than Diddy. And so the implication is and has been all over social media that other celebrities are shaking in their boots right now.
You always have to remember in these things that there is a wheel of finance going on. And we saw it in the Cosby thing, where, and I'm not a particularly big Cosby fan, but that wheel of finance deals with attorneys getting paid, documentaries getting made, news organizations getting web traffic at a time when they're losing money. And that wheel of finance involves certain attorneys. Busby is one of them. Wigdor is another. Deborah Katz is another. I'm one of these crazy people who's actually interested in stopping sexual violence and doing things that do that. I think that was really the discussion that Tarana Burke started with the Me Too movement. I'm not sure that anything that what we're seeing really does that. And I think that it's not a coincidence that the same attorneys keep popping up in these cases, because they're getting a third or 40% of whatever settlement there may be. Even if Sean Combs died today, okay, his estate would probably have to pay out. So, and they know that. So we're attaching on to that. It reminds me of the Deshaun Watson scenario. That was the other one where you have an attorney latching same attorney, Busby, and then you got, oh, we've got 200 people. And then, of course, Mr. Watson had enough money to pay $200K per complaint, per plaintiff. And that attorney is getting a third. And this is not to say that everyone's lying. It's not to say these guys are perfect or any of that. But I'm just saying there's a wheel of finance and money that's happening here. Certainly Gloria Allred has verified that, right? And so it does make me wonder how cases are proven from the 1990s. But again, Diddy apparently, Sean Combs was apparently stupid enough to video record things. So actually, we will, if that's true, if that's accurate, and if there's video evidence, we will get to see and get to judge what the meanings of consent are. One of the murky parts of this is going to be drug use, because typically when drug use is involved, you could have no consent. There's a lack of consent inherently built in. We do have a sex worker consent issue. How do you deal with that? I mean, there's a lot of complicated issues, but I do wish a lot of this was pointed in the direction of stopping sexual violence rather than the direction of attorneys paying their mortgages and buying houses and yachts, which is clearly going on in the case of Gloria Allred.
Totally. And I think you hit something there too, Lauren. Diddy's problem, Rashonda, his primary problem outside of video, if there is video, that's a bit major problem, but outside of video is the drugs, because once drugs is involved, as Lauren said, by law, there's no understanding of consent. You can't consent.
Baby oil? That wasn't the problem? Okay.
Baby, have you gone to Costco lately?
Right. Costco said, "Don't bring us in this." Yeah, Diddy's he's gonna get some time behind this. I don't like to. I always like to believe women. I don't know that there's 3,000 people that's been holding on to this for this long. And I think there's going to be some video, because the arrogance of recording all of these people with never thinking this could come back and bite me. That's a different type of arrogance, but that's, what we're dealing with, where we are.
Remember that the recording, I'm not saying it's going to backfire, but the issue of consent typically in these cases, such as the Weinstein case, was completely built on the subjective interpretation of the plaintiff in the case. With videotape, you don't have that issue, because you could actually look to see, are people consenting or not? So and in cases where, and this sounds like this is where this is headed, but it's unclear. This is a case apparently that's going to involve people who were engaging in multiple sessions of whatever they were doing. That would tell me that you showed up to the scene knowing what time it was, as it were, right? So that is then consensual. So the issue of consent is going to be a very interesting thing. I did think it got a little weaselly out there with Damian Williams with regard to the sex trafficking definition. But again, you got to see the full case to know, though it doesn't, of course, look good for Mr. Combs. You'd have to see the full testimony to know exactly how we're defining consent. I do think the consent bar has certainly gotten a lot lower since 2017. And that
absolutely.
Means, as to your point with Cyrus Vance, Stacey,
yes,
getting out there and saying that, we don't really need any evidence for these cases. Those are the types.
All we need is a complaint.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, that is the scariest thing a district attorney can say. To say what Cyrus Vance said on those courthouse steps was that.
And as a black journalist sitting here, I'm thinking to myself, okay, I'm not against adjudicating these cases per se, but I have a hard time believing that in the world of music and rock and roll, the only person being adjudicated for having sex parties is a black guy named Sean Combs. So it's not an argument not to prosecute. It's an argument for where's everybody else?
And there's a thought too that Diddy used these videos to blackmail people. So that will, as you said, Lauren, they're going to lay that case out eventually, and we will see all of the evidence. and he will have a chance to rebut the evidence or refute the evidence. We'll see what happens in court. Rashonda, what is the latest book? And tell folks again where they can get it.
It's The Queen of Sugar Hill, about the life of Hattie McDaniel, as we're coming up on the 85th anniversary of Gone with the Wind. It's just a time to look at how the Mammy issue wasn't as bad as everybody thought. They looked at and they vilified Hattie McDaniel when that's all she had at the time. But I take an insightful look into her life. It's called historical fiction, but The Queen of Sugar Hill is in all bookstores.
Queen of Sugar Hill. And of course, there's Black Virginia News. You can find all this stuff out at, right, Lauren? So go to Black Virginia News and check out the latest there and around, not just in Virginia, it's other places. I mean, you cover more than just Virginia, right?
No, I just really keep it Virginia. I mean, because it's the Black community in Virginia doesn't have a lot of news coverage. We have the New Journal and Guide and the Richmond Free Press. But I'm trying to do, this is a daily thing. So there's a lot of things that don't get covered. Virginia's 20% Black. So anyway, yeah, it's pretty much focused on Virginia, Black Virginia.
Well, in each of my email inboxes, I get the newsletter, Black Virginia News, all the time. So I'll be checking out what Lauren's doing. So y'all should check it out as well. And subscribe to her Black Virginia News. And check out The Queen of Sugar Hill as well. And we will check you out tomorrow. Thanks for watching. Let it be known.